Hello, my puppets. Today, for my Grimm's Fairy Tales, I have it opened up to the little goose girl. And so, we know that the little goose girl's fate is somewhat grim, but also kind of sweet. And you'll hear all about why in just a moment. So, there once was a time when an old queen whose husband had been dead for many years had a beautiful daughter. And when the princess grew up, she was betrothed to a prince who lived at a great distance. And when the time came for her to be married, she had to journey forth into the distant kingdom. The aged queen had packed up for her many costly vessels of silver and gold and trinkets, also of gold and silver, and cups and jewels, and in short, everything which appertained to a royal dowry. For she loved her child with all of her heart, and likewise she sent her maid-in-waiting, who was to ride with her, and hand over her to the bridegroom, and each had a horse for the journey. But the horse the king's daughter had been given was called Falda, and she could speak. So, when the hour of parting had come, the aged mother went into her bedroom and took a small knife and cut her finger with it until it bled, and she held a white handkerchief to it, into which she allowed 3 drops of blood to fall, and she gave it to her daughter, saying, "Dear child, preserve this carefully, and it will be of service to you upon your way." So they took a sorrowful leave of each other, and the princess was put away the cloth to her bosom, and mounted her horse, and went away to her bridegroom. After she had ridden for a while, she felt a burning thirst, and told her maid-in-waiting, "Dismount and take my cup from which you have brought for me, and get me some water from the stream, so that I should drink." "If you are thirsty," said the waiting maid, "get off your horse and lie down in the water, and drink yourself. I choose not to be your servant." And so, in her great thirst, the princess alighted and bent down in the water in the stream and drank, and was not even allowed to drink out of the golden cup. And then she said, "Oh, heaven!" and 3 drops of blood answered, "If your mother knew this, her heart would break." But the king's daughter was humble and said nothing, but mounted her horse again. She rode some miles further, but the day was warm and the sun scorched her, and she was thirsty once more. And when they came to a stream of water, she again cried to her maid-in-waiting, and said, "Dismount and give me some water in my golden cup," for she had long forgotten the girl's ill words. But the waiting maid said, still more haughtily, "If you wish to drink, drink as you can. I don't choose to be your maid." And then the king's daughter, in her great thirst, alighted and bent over the flowing stream, wept, and said, "Oh, heaven!" And the drops of blood again replied, "If your mother knew this, her heart would surely break." And thus, as she was drinking, leaning right over the stream, the handkerchief with the 3 drops of blood fell out of her bosom and floated away on the water without her observing, so great was her trouble. The waiting maid, however, had seen it and rejoiced, thinking that she had now power over the bride, for the princess had lost the drops of blood, and she had become weak and powerless. So, now when she wanted to mount her horse again, the one that was called Falda, the waiting maid said, "Falda is more suitable for me, and my nag will do for you." And the princess had to be content with that. And then the waiting maid, with many harsh words, bade the princess exchange her royal apparel for her own shabby clothes. And at length she was compelled to swear by the clear sky above her that she would not say one word of this to anyone at the royal court. And if she had not taken this oath, she would have been killed on the spot. But Falda saw all this, and observed it well. The waiting maid now mounted Falda, and the true bride with the bad horse, and thus they travelled forward until at length they entered the royal palace. There were rejoicings over her arrival, and the prince sprang forward to meet her, lifting the waiting maid from her horse, and thought it was his consort. She was conducted upstairs, but the real princess was left standing below. And the old king looked out of the window and saw her standing in the courtyard, and how daintily and delicate and beautiful she was, and instantly went to the royal apartment and asked the bride about the girl she had with her, who was standing down below in the courtyard, and who she was. I picked her up on my way as a companion. Give the girl something to work at, so she might not stand idle. But the old king had no work for her and knew of none. I have a little boy who tends geese. She may help him. The boy was called Conrad, and soon the true bride had to help him. So tending the geese, and soon after, the false bride said to the king, "Dearest husband, I beg you do me a favor." And he answered, "I will do so most willingly." "Then send for the knacker and have the head off the horse which I rode here cut off, for it vexed me along the way." In reality, she was afraid that the horse might tell how she behaved to the king's daughter, and then she succeeded in making the king promise that it should be done, and the faithful Falda was to die. This came to the ears of the real princess, and she secretly promised to pay the knacker a piece of gold if he would perform a small service to her. There was a dark-looking gateway in the town, through which each morning and evening she had to pass with the geese. And would he be so good as to nail up Falda's head on it, so that she might see him again more than once? The knacker promised to do that, and cut off the head and nailed it fast beneath the dark gateway. Early in the morning, when she and Conrad drove their flock beneath the gateway, she said in passing, "Alas, Falda hanging there." And then the head answered, "Alas, young queen, how ill you fare! If this your tender mother knew, her heart would break in two." And then they went further out of the town, and drove the geese into the country, and when they had come to the meadow, she sat down and unbound her hair, which was like pure gold, and Conrad saw it, and delighted in its brightness, and wanted to pluck out a few hairs. But she said, "Blow, blow, thou gentle wind, I say, blow Conrad's little hat away, and make him chase it here and there, until I've braided all my hair, and bound it up again." And there came such a violent wind that it blew Conrad's hat far away across the country, and he was forced to run after it, and when he came back, she had finished combing her hair and was putting it up again, so he could not take any of it. And then Conrad was angry and would not speak to her, and thus they watched the geese until the evening and then went home. The next day, as they were driving the geese out of the gateway, the maiden said, "Alas, Falda hanging there." And Falda answered, "Alas, young queen, how ill you fare! If your tender mother knew, her heart would surely break in two." And she again sat down in the field, beginning to comb out her hair, and Conrad ran to try and clutch it. And so in haste she said, "Blow, blow, thou gentle wind, I say, blow Conrad's little hat away, and make him chase it here and there, until I've braided up all my hair, and bound it up again." So the wind blew and blew his little hat off, far and away, and Conrad was forced to run after it. And when he came back, her hair had been put up for a long time, and he could get none of it. And so they looked after their geese until evening came. But in the evening after they got home, Conrad went to the old king and said, "I won't tend the geese with that girl any longer." "Why not?" inquired the aged king. "Oh, because she vexes me." "Well, why not?" And so, in the morning, Conrad explained, as we pass beneath the dark gateway, well, she will walk with the flock as normal, but there's a sorry horse's head on the wall, and she says to it, "Alas, Falda hanging there." And the head actually replies, "Alas, young queen, how ill you fare! If this is your tender mother surely knew, that her heart would then break in two." And Conrad went on to relate what happened on the goose pasture, and how, when there, he had to chase his hat. The aged king commanded him to drive his flock out again the next day, and as soon as morning came, he placed himself in the dark gateway, and heard how the maiden had spoken to the head of Falda, and Then, too, he went into the country and hid himself in the thick of the meadow. And there soon with his own eyes the goose girl and the goose boy bringing their flock, and how after a while she sat down, unplaited her hair, which shone with radiance, and soon said, "Blow, blow, thou gentle wind, I say, blow Conrad's little hat away, and make him chase it here and there, until I've braided all my hair and bound it up again." And then a blast of wind would come and carry Conrad's hat, so far that he had to run away, and the maiden quietly went on combing her hair, and all the while the king observed. Then, quite unseen, he went away, and when the goose girl came home in the evening, he called her aside and asked why she did all these things. "I may not tell you that. I dare not lament my sorrows to any human being, for I have sworn not to do so by the heaven which is above me, and if I had not done that, I should have lost my life." Well, he urged her and left her no peace, but he could draw nothing from her, and then he said, "Well, if you will not tell me anything, tell your sorrows to the iron stove there," and he went away. She crept into the iron stove and began to weep. At last, lamenting, emptying her whole heart, she said, "Here I am, deserted by the whole world, and yet I'm the king's daughter, and a false waiting maid has been forced to me, and insisted that I pass, being compelled to put off my royal apparel, and she has taken my place with my bridegroom, and I have to perform menial service as a goose girl. If my mother did not know, well, if she found, her heart would surely break." The aged king, however, was standing outside of the pipe stove and was listening to what she said and heard it. And he came back again and bade her to come out of the stove, and the royal garments were placed on her. And it was a marvelous how beautiful that she was. And the aged king summoned his son and revealed to him that he had gotten the false bride, who was only a waiting maid, but that the true one standing there at some time was the goose girl. And the young king rejoiced with all his heart, and saw that her beauty and youth, and there was a great feast made ready, to which all of the people and good friends were invited. At the head of the table, the bridegroom, with the king's daughter at one side of him, and the waiting maid on the other. But the waiting maid was blinded and did not recognize the princess in her dazzling array. When they had eaten and drunk and were merry, the aged king asked the waiting maid a riddle as to what a person deserved who had behaved in such a way as her master, and at the same time related the whole story and asked what sentence one merited. Then the false bride said she deserves no better fate than to be stripped entirely naked and put into a barrel which is studded inside with pointed nails, and have 2 white horses be harnessed to it, which will drag her along through the street one after another until she is dead. "It is you," said the aged king. "You have pronounced your own sentence, and thus it shall be done to you." When the sentence had been carried out, the young king married his true bride, and both of them reigned over the kingdom in peace and happiness. So, here again we have, a contrast of the whole wicked person being, ugly and deceitful and things like that, and how beauty and youthfulness goes about showing the goodness of one, which is somewhat irksome, but very traditional in wonderful fairy tales like these. And so it's not going anywhere anytime fast. But they did, of course, go ahead and reveal that deceit. And I've always liked somebody coming up with their own sentence because, well, if they had taken the time to be more considerate and compassionate, maybe they would have had a chance, but they serve out the harshest of things upon their own heads. And so I kind of like how that plays itself out in a terrible sort of way. But I hope you guys enjoyed the story. So good night.